Hi, and welcome to the podcast channel, podcastmybusiness.com.au and video on contentmadeeasy.com.au. And today we're joined by Jean Hansen from Clarity Healthcare, and we're talking about a big thing for us here in Australia, getting back to work blues and how to beat them. How can we do that, Jean?
Hi, Tony. It's great to be here today. Look, there is a handful of things that we can do to beat the
Mm,
post-holiday blues. I know it's something
mm,
that I'm sure we can all relate to, particularly at this time of the year. I think the first thing that's really helpful for listeners to understand is potentially a little bit about what actually causes the post-holiday blues, or at least what one of the main things is that can contribute to it. And one of those things is the fact that in the lead up to a break, to the holidays, we get this sense of excitement, we get anticipation around having a rest from demands. And so, with that, we get this big spike in our neurotransmitter called dopamine, which is responsible for that source of motivation and pleasure and excitement. And so, once that holiday ends, naturally, our dopamine can have a big drop. Also, the holiday period is when we're getting some of those core needs as humans met, right? We're getting that sense of spontaneity finally. We're finally getting a little bit of rest from demands. We're getting freedom, all those different things. And so both that dopamine drop because the reward period is over, as well as not getting some of those nice things that meet a lot of
mm,
our needs, makes
mm,
sense that we then experience this quite normal, in many cases, drop in mood. And so I guess the first thing for listeners to know is that in many cases, this post-holiday blues feeling is a temporary response to that high reward period and that it won't
mm,
last forever.
mm. Yeah, exactly right. And I know when we're on holidays, we get to power down. Some of us who have our own business, we don't get a complete break ever. But that's okay. That's the price you pay for independence. And it is, yeah. I do have people overseas that can take some of the load, but there's some things you just can't walk away. Um,
Yeah.
so that's a separate issue. Maybe we can do another session on that separately as
Mm.
well. So,
Mm.
how to deal with that when it's small businesses. Um, but yeah, one of the things is putting pressure on yourself. So you think you're back at work and you're going to be instantly back into work, ready to roll mode.
Yeah. Yeah, absolutely. And so, if one of the tips I can recommend is in some ways reassuring yourself that it is a normal and temporary adjustment period and that your dopamine and all those levels will even out in time. The second tip I could give you is to actually think about what are the pressures and expectations that you're putting on yourself, not just for those first few weeks back at work or study, but into 2026. What are the things that you're saying to yourself? Because the new year is a period of social comparison, pressures that we're either putting on ourselves or that external
Mm,
people are putting on ourselves. And
mm,
so taking a moment to go, what are those pressures and expectations I'm putting on myself? And to be mindful of potentially adjusting those expectations, particularly for those first few weeks, so that they are both realistic, they're flexible, and they're self-compassionate, which not all of us are great at doing, but something I think that can be really helpful is to ask yourself, if you had a loved one that was putting these same demands and pressures on themselves, what would you think of that and what would you say to them? Right? Would you be having those same expectations? It might be that that week you think you want to get all those things on your to-do list done, but instead maybe you make the realistic expectation that you're only going to get half of them done. Maybe instead of meal planning for the entire week, you're going to buy a few lunches of takeaway if that's in your means. You know, it is about adjusting those expectations so that they're a little bit more realistic and self-compassionate.
yeah, and there are some other things as well. You can go back to work and realize that your job really is crap and you need to get out.
Oh yeah, absolutely, Tony. Absolutely. Absolutely. I think another thing that can be really helpful to beat the post-holiday blues is to not just wait for that next holiday or trip to feel good, but to actually look at how can I start to schedule some small sources of autonomy, pleasure, and rest into my day to day week. And you were talking before, Tony, about the fact that as a business owner, you can't really do that much. There is no time to clock off. But I would challenge you to go, what is something that you could do that kind of makes it easy. Maybe it's something like committing to, a social sports group once a week, or once a month you have a pre-planned dinner party or a games night. Is it just having 5 minutes in the morning to go for a walk and have a cup of tea before you start your day? Because you have to actually schedule those things in to be an effective business person, right? You
Mm.
can't pour from
Yeah,
an empty cup. So that would
yeah.
be another tip I would say. And then, of course, yes, we can look at the deeper issues relating to work and work-life balance as well.
Well, that's interesting because another one of your points was getting organized. So, yeah,
Mm.
we do need to get more organized when we start off at the start of the year.
Yeah, absolutely. Getting organized is something particularly just to help with that initial adjustment period in those first few weeks back at work or the week leading up to work. It's essentially about doing anything that's going to make that first day or week back a little bit less dreadful and make you feel like you're in a better headspace. So it could be things like laying out your work attire and making sure that you've got your work clothes set up for the week. It might be doing a little bit of meal prep on the Sunday so that you feel this sense of efficacy in being able to go, I've got some things organized. This is going to help the rest of the demands for the week feel more manageable. So, yes, getting organized can be really helpful.
And one of the things with getting organized is that you're back at work, kids are not back at school. So how do
Yes.
you cope with that?
Oh, I think I want to loop back to that previous point I said about expectations.
Mm,
So, really adjusting those expectations on yourself as a
mm,
parent,
mm,
because it's not going to be perfect. It's probably going to be a little bit stressful. There's going to
mm,
be a lot going
mm,
on.
mm,
So,
mm,
adjusting your expectations on how you manage your kids. Are there additional supports you can bring in? Because we often don't like to ask for help as well. What are some things that you can do to make it both more achievable and realistic for yourself? Maybe it's that you give the kids, you don't pack lunches for the kids for every day of the week. You do give them a couple of gold coins to go buy something at
mm,
lunch. Just
mm,
adjusting your expectations. Are there people that you can bring in to support you? That's not a luxury that everybody has, but just thinking about what can you do in a compassionate way to make it
mm,
more achievable.
mm. Exactly. Now, how do you, this is going to be a tricky one. How do you cope with bosses that either haven't clocked off or are more energetic, more raring to go than you are, and have absolutely no sympathy or empathy for you starting back?
Yeah. Yeah. Well, this would be my talk to all the bosses out there to
Mm,
kind of remember that you're in some ways only as good as the morale of your staff. And so, more, I guess, shifting towards managers and bosses to kind of really check in with your staff and maybe adjust your expectations on productivity levels in those first few weeks back for staff. For you as the person turning back up to work, I think it is this tricky thing of reducing the expectation that just because your boss isn't taking a break doesn't mean that you can't. You can always
mm,
frame that to your boss as well, I think, in
mm,
terms of for me to do my job, for me to be able to show up and give you 100%, I need to take little breaks or I need
mm,
some adjustment periods to ease back into
mm,
things.
mm,
I think as long as you're doing your part as an employee to refill your cup in the different ways that we're talking about, there needs to be a bit of give and take from your boss because it benefits them. It will benefit your
mm,
boss for you
mm.
to be able to take pauses, do what you need to do in that adjustment period because we can't run on empty.
No, exactly right. So we've got to refill the tank regularly and take
Yeah.
regular breaks. Yeah.
Yeah,
So
it's not always easy.
no, exactly right. So what could um, some of these could be more long-standing and more permanent issues.
Hmm.
So how do you look out for those and how do you cope with those?
Yeah, it's a really good question, Tony. I think the first thing to understand is that whilst I've talked about the post holiday blues being this a temporary adjustment period, and we've talked about a few management
Mm,
strategies to help make that adjustment period easier, there are definitely some things to look out for that could mean that there's more long standing, deeper issues that require some deeper exploration, particularly the level of distress that you're experiencing and the duration of the distress. Each person is different, but if you are experiencing sustained, ongoing low mood, low motivation, fatigue, anxiety regarding work, or just life in general, and it's not subsiding after a few weeks, that's a sign that it requires further exploration. Similarly, if you're looking at going back to work and maybe it hasn't been going on for that long, but you're experiencing like really extreme distress, it's a sign to look at it further. And there can be lots of different factors that contribute to that feeling, right? You've already alluded to one, which is that there could be some problems going on at work, right? It could be things like lack of work satisfaction. It could be things like burnout. It could be things like the role that you're in doesn't align with your values, or you don't feel competent in that role, or there's too much on you. To give in just a little side tool that I really, really like, Tony, there is this thing that we refer to in psychology as the transactional model of stress. And I want you to imagine that there's a seesaw. And on this side of the seesaw is external demands. So that's the external demands of work. It could be the external demands of other things. And then on this side of the seesaw is your personal resources. Now, personal resources includes anything from your emotional resources, your physical health resources. It could be friends and support systems. It could be tools that you use to manage things. It could be skills that you've got. It includes anything and everything that's in your toolkit to manage the external demands, right? Stress occurs when the external demands outweigh your personal resources. And so in this instance, where we might be not doing okay, we have sustained periods of distress, being able to look at, and it's a really helpful framework for monitoring signs of burnout and problem-solving burnout. What are the ways that we can balance this back out again? We can either reduce external demands to tip it back this way, or we need to increase personal resources to tip it this way, or we need to do a bit of both. Does that make sense?
It does. And for the podcast channel, where we don't get the wonderful visual clues, that was in relation to you hold up your arm, and one side is the fist and the other side is the elbow. So that's what we're referring to. And the elbow goes down and the fist goes up and vice versa. So trying to give those visual.
I should have verbalized with some more imagery. Just imagine exactly like a seesaw scale, and on one side of it is the external demands, and on the other side is personal resources. And so you shouldn't have to do that by yourself, though, Tony. I really recommend in these instances that you could go away and use that model to problem solve yourself what might be contributing to difficulties, but also to reach out to a trusted friend or to a mental health professional to seek further support and just to problem solve things. We shouldn't have to often manage this all by ourselves. We need a sounding board often.
And what a wonderful segue, Jean, because you do have the post-holiday blues checklist. So well done to that. So we'll put that in the show notes for people to have a look at. Social media channels don't like you putting links into their posts.
That's so fine. Yeah. We at Clarity Healthcare just think that it's a great time of year for self-reflection in many ways, not in a critical way, but to check in with yourself. And so this checklist, or self-check that's available on our Clarity Healthcare website, is just a space where you can actually reflect on how you are feeling going into the new year.
Yep, exactly. And before we go, there's one little topic that we should have a look at, and that is New Year's resolutions. I don't believe in them.
You don't believe in them, Tony? Why is that?
Because it sets you up for failure more so than success, in my opinion.
Yeah. I think just like with many things, Tony, it's never black or white. Yeah, it's never that this is completely good or this is completely bad. I think it's about being able to hold two opposing ideas at the same time. And for me, Tony, those ideas are that New Year's resolutions, or what we might call goals, can be motivating, can be exciting. It's like I said, the new year is an opportunity for reflection, to go, what was I not happy with last year? Or what was I really happy with last year? And what do I want to get out of my life this year? Life is precious. What do we want to do this year in 2026, right? However, if what I spoke about earlier is happening, which is that there is underlying self-comparison, unrealistic or rigid goals, if our sense of self-worth is being really strongly tied to those goals and New Year's resolutions, it is a recipe for distress, to be honest.
Yeah.
And so we can all go away and reflect on how can we create goals that are, one, in alignment with our values. So not in alignment with what our parents want or with what our boss wants or with what the world wants, but what do we want in terms of what's in alignment with our values? And yeah, what's going to be realistic and what's going to, spark joy for us. So I think those are some strategies we can use to tailor New Year's goals or resolutions in a way that's a little bit healthier.
Yeah, definitely goals. Of course, I do goals, but yeah, there's a lot of pressure with that term. People ask each other,
Yeah.
what are your New Year's resolutions? I don't ask you what are your goals. There's
Yeah.
only New Year's. What are your New Year's resolutions? So I just say, look, I don't believe in resolutions. I do goals. Do you
Yeah.
want to hear my goals? And they
Yeah.
always go, no, I don't want to hear your goals. I want to hear your New Year's resolutions because they
It's
think we're
bizarre,
going to.
isn't it?
It is.
It
It's
has a
weird.
lot of stigma attached to it. It's got a lot of dread attached to it. It's like,
Yeah.
oh, goodness.
Yeah, exactly. You should always have goals, especially in business. You have no choice. So I do have goals for this
Mm,
year that
of
I'm going to
course.
hit pretty quickly. So I'm very happy with that. So cool.
Congratulations.
Anything else you want to add, Jean?
No, like I said, I think that the main thing is that, this is a perfect opportunity if you're listening to do some self-reflection on how you're feeling
Mm,
going back to work. And hopefully some of the
mm.
things we've talked about today start to give you some practical things to go away with and look at if you are feeling a bit of the post-holiday blues. Know that you're not alone.
Absolutely. All right. So thank you very much for that. So that's Jean Hansen from clarityhealthcare.com.au.
Beautiful. Thanks so much for having me, Tony.
Thank you.